Hello, and welcome back to the Breadwinner Podcast. It's Caroline here, and this is episode 100. But it's just unbelievable to me. It has been over a year of podcasting, of sharing, and helping you grow thriving sourdough microbakery businesses. And I can't thank you enough for getting us to 100. I thought about making a big, fun milestone episode celebrating and maybe recognizing what I've learned or some listener favorites from previous episodes. But the reality is, I just don't have time for something like that right now to put that together. So we're just going to pick right up where we left off. Today's episode is going to be part 2, following up from episode 98, just 2 episodes ago, where we started walking through how to map out the strategy to pay yourself $1,000 for the month. This is a formula that you can use and you can pay yourself $2,000 or $4,000. It is a scalable formula, but because the majority of my listeners tend to be earlier in their microbakery journey, $1,000 to pay yourself feels like a really good starting point. That might feel like a really big goal to some of you, and to some of you, that might feel like an absolute necessity. You may really need to be paying yourself much more than that, more like a full-time job income. And so this strategy will help you wrap your mind around how to actually create a plan and achieve that income goal. So in part 1, we talked about knowing your cost and pricing for profit. If you haven't listened to episode 98, which was part 1 of the series, I would say go back and listen to that one so that you are right on the same page with me here today. But in a nutshell, we talked about how to understand exactly how much your products actually cost to make, and then how to figure out your profit margin. So how to price to make sure that after you've covered your ingredients and your packaging, that you have enough left over to cover your overhead, your software costs, your insurance, your utilities, plus set aside money for taxes, for savings, and then to pay yourself. This is really, really easy to just skip past as an entrepreneur. And especially in the early stages of building a business, it's so easy to just pour all the money right back into the business. And I've absolutely done a lot of that, a lot of reinvestment. But if you set the pattern early on as you're building your business of intentionally choosing to pay yourself, even if that's a very small percentage overall of the money that's coming in, but intentionally choose to pay yourself, that's going to make it that much easier as your revenue grows to make sure that you are allocating money for your household expenses as well. Because really, talking about money can be a little bit weird sometimes. We get a little funny about it, and the majority of my listeners are female, and even more so, we find this with females that talking about money can feel sort of icky sometimes. But the reality is, if we are in business, we need to be making money. It's responsible. It is being a wise steward of our resources, of our time and our energy. If we're just pouring all of this time and love and effort and energy into growing a business, baking for our community, but not actually allocating and setting aside money to pay ourselves, to serve our household, to save for the future, that is just an irresponsible use of all of that time and energy and resources. That may sound a little bit like tough love, but that is the reality, that we need to make money. Otherwise, it's just, as my bookkeeper Megan says, it's just an expensive hobby. And we're not in this for an expensive hobby. We're in this to grow thriving businesses that serve our family and our community. All that to say, a little off-script introduction to part 2 of your strategy to pay yourself $1,000. We're going to just be building right on top of episode 98, where we mapped out all of our costs for our products and then set the prices accordingly. And one little detail that I realized I did not explicitly explain in that process of mapping out your cost is when you are calculating the cost of a batch of something that makes a lot, for example, cookies, you will price out the cost of the entire batch. Mine, for example, makes about 20 cookies. And then to determine the cost per item, you'll just divide that whole total by however many items you get out of a single batch. So for my cookies, for example, I know that my entire batch makes 20 80-gram cookies. So I calculate the cost of the entire batch. So if my full batch makes 20, I just divide that by 20 to get the cost of one. And then I can multiply that by 6 to get the cost of a half dozen, and making sure to include the packaging costs in there as well. As I mentioned in episode 98, I do have a calculator tool, a Google Sheets tool that I have created that helps take some of the legwork out of the calculations. And so if this makes your head spin a little bit, which for me, numbers tend to do that sometimes, it takes me a little bit extra time to work through those numbers and really make sure that I understand them. If numbers don't come naturally to you, that Google Sheets tool, my profit and pricing calculator, is available down in the link in the show notes, and that is available for purchase. If you are number savvy and you maybe love spreadsheets, because some people do, and we need spreadsheet lovers in the world, I would suggest maybe just making your own spreadsheet to help you automate some of the calculations so that you don't have to do it manually for each product. And with that system in place, with all of your costs calculated and your products priced out, let's get into the next step, which is where it gets really practical and starts to come together in terms of accomplishing your revenue goal. And this is really exciting. Again, my profit and pricing calculator has a tab that helps you make these calculations yourself. It kind of automates and connects the dots in a sense. So let's go back to that list of products that you have priced out. By now, you've probably taken a look at your profit margins and you have an idea of maybe the products that have a really healthy margin and maybe some that you need to raise the prices on a little bit. But with all of that information, you are ready to move on to the next step of reverse engineering your goal. The strategy that I really, really love for cash management comes from the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. If you haven't read this book, I absolutely recommend it. I have absolutely no affiliation with it at all. I just have read it multiple times. I really like the audiobook format because the author reads it and it's very engaging. It's kind of like listening to an interesting podcast. But his system, and he has a heart for ensuring that entrepreneurs are profitable. His system is to take that gross revenue, all of your revenue that comes in, and break it down into pockets. So one is going to be your taxes. That's money that you just automatically set aside and put it somewhere that you can't touch. That's not your money, so you set it aside. One is for overhead or your operating expenses. So your utilities, your software Canva subscription, your vendor fees, your equipment, your parchment paper, your ingredients, all of that goes into your operating expenses. One bucket for savings, and this is the money that you're setting aside and allocating for rainy day and for investment in larger equipment. And then your fourth one is for your owner's pay. And then he also suggests a fifth bucket for profit. And this could just be as little as 1%, but he suggests setting aside a small amount of profit automatically. First things first, you allocate that profit and leave it in there so it can compound and build month after month. And then you pull half of that out every quarter just to treat yourself or maybe to pay down debt. But that money is truly profit. That's not your owner's pay. That is a whole separate thing that you just take a quarterly draw every 3 months. So that's kind of the big picture. It is a fascinating system, a game changer for entrepreneurs. So again, that's the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. I'll put that link down in the show notes too if you want to check it out. But he has some kind of recommended percentages and you can play with this, but I like to set aside about 30 to 40% for owner's pay, usually about 20 to 25% for taxes, 10 to 15% for savings, and then the remainder for your overhead and operating expenses. You may find that you need to play with and adjust those percentages and give yourself more for operating expenses, maybe less for owner's pay. It just needs to come together to equal 100%. For really, really easy math, let's go ahead and just put 25% in each of the buckets. So 25% to owner's pay, 25% for taxes, 25% for overhead, and 25% for savings. So if your goal is to pay yourself $1,000 in a month, that means that your total gross revenue needs to be $4,000 for the month, because 25% of that is going to be the money that you pay yourself with. And then from that big monthly goal, I like to break it down into bite-sized chunks and turn it into weekly goals. So that means you're looking at a $1,000 week in product sales. This all of the money, top line revenue coming in for the products that you sell. That's your weekly target. That's 25% of your gross full amount of revenue for the entire month being allocated to pay yourself. And then the remainder, that other 75%, is split up into the other categories to cover your taxes, your operating expenses, and your savings. Hopefully you're tracking with me so far, but that is the really, really simple but practical way to pay yourself $1,000. And like I said, that was for really easy math, putting 25% evenly in each of those 4 buckets. If you change those percentages around a little bit, for example, 40% allocated to owner's pay, 20% to taxes, 30% to your overhead operating expenses, and then 10% into your long-term savings, that's going to change the rest of the numbers a little bit. So with 40% of your total revenue being your owner's pay, then that would mean your total monthly revenue to pay yourself $1,000 would need to be $2,500. That's $1,000 in owner's pay, $500 into taxes, $750 into overhead, and $250 into savings. So if you're aiming to bring home $1,000 a month with those percentages, using that 40, 20, 30, 10 split, then your business would need to generate $2,500 a month. Then to break that down weekly into those bite-sized chunks, that's $625 in total sales in 1 week. So now that you have your revenue goal and you've broken that down into weekly targets, this is where you get to kind of play around with those prices that you set and the whole picture comes together. So you set your prices to make sure that you have a healthy profit margin. You're going to go back to those prices from episode 98, and you can play with combinations here. You can see exactly how many of each product you would need to sell to hit that weekly number. There are a couple of ways to do this. You can chicken scratch on a piece of paper. I love to do that sometimes. You can take that revenue goal, whatever it is, if it's $1,000 a week in sales, if it's $625 a week in sales, maybe your goal is higher and you're going for $2,000 a week in sales. No matter what number you're working with, you're going to go back to those product prices that you set and look at how many of each product you would need to sell or what combination thereof to hit that goal. So let's go back to your $1,000 number. That makes math easy. It's a nice round number. Let's see how many, a few different products you would need to sell to hit that number. So that could look like 30 loaves at $10 for $300, plus 30 inclusion loaves at $12. That's another $360, plus 10 pans of focaccia at $10 each for another $100, plus 5 packs of a dozen cookies for $30. That's $150, and 18 cinnamon rolls at $5 each. That's $90. That brings you to $1,000. So to hit $1,000, you do not just have to sell 100 loaves, period. That's the fun of it, is that you get to sort of play with your combinations. This could look like if you know that you have a set quantity. For example, I usually do 24 sandwich loaves, so I know that's going to be $240. I do 16 pans of focaccia at $10. I know that's going to be $160. I usually do 40 loaves of original. That's going to be $400. So those 3 staple products at my top quantities brings me to $700. And I just know that that's my ongoing reference. And then if I want to hit $1,000 in revenue, I just need to decide how I'm going to complete that extra 300. Am I going to do some inclusion loaves? Am I going to do some scones, some cookies, some cinnamon rolls, some English muffins? I have a lot of different products that I can pull from, and I know their pricing, so I can easily fill in the puzzle pieces to calculate the revenue goal that I want to hit. My market's coming up in the month of September. I want to hit right around $1,800 to $2,000 in my revenue goal for each market. That means that I'm going to take those set numbers. So I'm just going to start off the top with that 40 original loaves, 24 sandwich, and 16 focaccia, because I know that those are just staples that are always there. So that's $700 right there. And then I just need to decide how to round out that remainder. I will pull in probably 10 packs of granola. They're $9 each. Probably about 12 bags of crackers for $6 each. I'm bringing scones this time. They're going to be in packs of 2 for $6, and I'll probably do 18 or so of those. And so as I just kind of bring in those products and I know the prices, that all adds up, and I can figure out if I'm falling a little bit short of my revenue target. I can either decide, like, am I coming up on my capacity, and is it going to be pushing it too much to actually hit that revenue goal? Or can I get a little bit creative and consider another product, or lean into something really popular that sells really well, like English muffins? Now, once this comes together for you and you start to see that it's just a matter of plugging and playing those quantities and those numbers, it's no longer guesswork. You can strategically and intentionally identify your revenue goal, know exactly where you're headed, how much money you need to allocate into each bucket to make sure that you're saving money to pay yourself, and then utilize your strategic pricing to make sure that you have the right profit margins to calculate your total and your product mix to hit your revenue goals. This is the difference between the bakers who kind of come and go and don't stick around and just sort of bake what's fun and bake all of the special requests, because it really is fun. It's so fun to play with those flavor combinations and just jump at any special requests that people send your way. But the difference between those and then the bakers with the staying power who build burnout proof businesses that they love, and while we get absolutely exhausted, we love going to work each day because we have so much intentionality and strategy and a plan, and the business is actually paying you as it should. This all might take a little bit of trial and error, a little bit of tweaking those numbers, and you may even want to come back and re-listen to this episode once or twice. But overall, as you start to implement this strategy of first knowing your product cost, then setting your pricing to have profit margins that actually pay you, then breaking it down into a monthly and then a weekly revenue goal based on allocating money to pay yourself, cover all of your other expenses, and then identifying your product mix to hit that weekly revenue goal. It all comes together and it all works to take out all of that headache and guesswork and just kind of mystery around your numbers. I am really, really excited about the way that this could be a game changer for you as you listen. If you implement this strategy to actually take control of your numbers, this could change everything. Now, like I said, to kind of circle back around, if calculating all of your numbers begins to feel a little bit overwhelming, I do have the pricing and profit calculator. It's a Google Sheets tool, so you will make your own copy and then it's yours. It populates on every device where you're logged into your Google account. I pull it up on my phone, on my laptop, on my iPad, so that I can access my numbers anytime I need to. If a product cost changes, if Costco raises their prices, or if I source my ingredients somewhere else, all I need to do is make one change in my spreadsheet, and that change will reflect in all of my products. So it's linked down below. It is a very, very powerful investment in your business, and it's not very expensive to get this Google Sheets tool that will take so much of the guesswork and headache out of your numbers. Again, it breaks down your costs, your pricing, and then it has a page where it will help you figure out that product mix. You just pull in all of your products from drop-down menus and play with the numbers to see how many of each one you would need to make to hit your revenue goal. It's a simple tool, the most powerful resource I think I've made. It's helped so many bakers gain more confidence in their pricing. All of my inner circle members have used it, and it has changed things for them in terms of just knowing their numbers and feeling confident in how they're setting their prices. So to tie a bow on all of this, you don't just need to bake more just because. You need to bake with a plan that supports your goals, your life, and your time. Your time is one valuable resource that is so easy to overlook. So having intentionality, having a strategy in what you're baking and why, how many, and how you're pricing it is absolutely crucial. So start by knowing your numbers, price with intention, give yourself a clear path to that first 1K revenue month or beyond. And this is just the beginning for you. I am so excited. I hope this is absolutely a game changer. I guess this feels appropriate that this is episode 100, a milestone for bakers taking charge and ownership of their numbers and truly understanding how to strategically build a business that pays them. I hope this was helpful. Again, like I said, it might be a re-listen, especially if you're listening on an audio platform instead of YouTube. You can go to my website, carolinebauer.com/episode 100 to read the show notes as well. If you're visual, that might kind of help break things down a bit. But I can't wait to hear the aha moments that you experience as you work through and take ownership of your own numbers. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Thank you for getting me here to 100 episodes. Here's to the next 100.